Welcome everyone to the latest episode of Upwards. Today I am joined by two very special guests with me today live from the Onwardly offices. It's a blustery May day. We're doing our best to stay warm and talk about security and privacy and technology and everything in between. So today I'm joined by Liz Knight and Andrew Taylor, both from Theta. And Theta are a partner of Onwardly's, and they're doing some really interesting things in the security and technology space. So welcome, both of you. Thanks for joining me in real life. It's always better in real life. So today we're going to talk about a couple of different things. We're going to talk about trends in security, trends, and then what we're seeing in the technology space, and how we should think about those from a protecting our business point of view. So just let me introduce the guests for a second here. So Liz Knight is recently joined Theta. She heads up cybersecurity, the cybersecurity team at Theta. She spent about the last 17 years or so working with customers to deliver transformative solutions across New Zealand, Australia, Europe, and the US. So very, very international experience there, which is cool. And so we've also got Andrew Taylor, who is the head of product at Theta. Andrew runs the product group, designing, building, and selling, operating a portfolio of Theta-made products. He is also responsible for the Innovation Lab, which works with emerging technologies and trends to assist customers to accelerate their innovation. So lots of cool things happening out of there. And we'll have a chance to talk maybe about a couple of those as we go as well. So welcome to you both.
Thank you.
Thanks, Phil. It's great to have you on board. If you don't know me, my name is Phil. I'm founder and CEO of Onwardly, and we are a cybersecurity operations platform which helps people build, establish, and run their security and privacy programs. So really happy to be talking with you today. Let's dive into it.
Cool.
Let's talk about the emergence of new technologies that bring both opportunities to us and risks as well. What trends are you seeing in the cybersecurity space, and how can organizations adopt these strategies and to stay ahead of the game? Maybe I'll start with you, Liz.
So
You're in the hot seat.
I am in the hot seat. I guess one of the trends, obviously, that everyone's seeing is, the expansion of AI and the large language learning models. So really trying to understand within the business how we can, minimize the risk of using those products. And so there's a lot of discussions going on. There's a lot of making sure that our policies align with, this kind of emerging technology that everyone wants to play with, and really trying to understand it and, kind of grow the use of it. Both we want to enable the use of it, but we also want to protect and make sure we're, covering compliance, ethics, security, all those good things. So it's really finding that balance.
Yeah, not an easy thing to do, and it's sort of hit us all. Almost it feels like it's come out of nowhere.
And it's evolving really quickly, and every day there's a new addition to a product that now has AI, and it's like, okay, can we make sure our data is protected? How are we going to use it? How do we enable it? Who can use it? So there's a lot of discussion. Yeah,
and it's undeniable that it's such an incredible productivity booster, and lots of we're never going to stop people sort of using it. Is it more about guiding people on the right pathway to use it responsibly, to use it ethically, to use it securely?
So, for example, we have a whole lot of development going on at Theta. So we want our developers to use the tool, but then making sure they're doing it within an enterprise framework where we can actually make sure that the data is not public, that it's kept private. So really understanding the the switches within the products we can use to ensure privacy and control.
Yes, indeed. Yeah. Andrew, how are you seeing companies, maybe even yourselves, embrace this, but also avoid some of the mistakes that people are making as well?
Yeah, well, I mean, there's definitely that side to it, which is the privacy side and how you use it as a business, and then there's a kind of like thinking through how does that same technology work if you're an adversary, and it really does kind of make things easier for everybody. So if it makes it easier for someone like you to be a great coder, then it's going to be making it easier for an adversary to be a great coder too. So if they were trying to do something before and they didn't have the technical skill set to do that, they can now maybe have the technical skill to do that. And there's a lot of people say, oh, well, using OpenAI, then they try and put the guardrails in, and you can't ask it to write some nefarious code because it will detect that and stop you. But you can get around that pretty easily. And now more and more those models are getting out into the wild, as open source as well. So preventing that kind of use of those models is difficult. So yeah, scams, phishing,
Yes.
and coding, the ability to do those more easily is certainly something that to watch out for.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're expecting more sophisticated phishing campaigns. Like in the past, you're like, look out for that spelling mistake. Probably that's not going to be the case.
No. I mean, people can write extremely well worded, convincing messages, emails. Like you say, employ technologies which previously would have been quite hard to do really easily. So everyone's going to have to really lift their awareness game around this stuff. It's getting harder and harder to, to detect stuff. So it's all going to have to evolve.
Yeah, it means you need to go, well, how do we look as an organization? What are our, if we look at external attack surface and what's discoverable about our organization, previously you might have said, okay, well, we don't have to worry about that too much. We'll concentrate on antivirus and inside the organization. But now that's all publicly discoverable. And if you combine that publicly discoverable information with AI superpowers, you can kind of automate
engineering.
You can automate social engineering. You can do a lot of things in a more slick way.
I think people don't realize that that's how much information can be triangulated from your public that's just out there in the public. And because you might see a little bit of it here, a little bit of it there, but with the power of something to aggregate that really cleverly, it can produce quite a convincing profile on somebody and impersonate them to a kind of a quite a high degree.
A high degree,
yeah. So being careful, I think what we put out there as well is going to be really part of the solution as well. Maybe don't put your entire life online publicly. It's probably just been good advice for a long time, to be honest. But it's and it's also sort of hard to avoid depending on what role you are as well. So
it is.
Very interesting. It's very topical. So how do we prioritize? When it comes to managing, we're talking about security for a second, cybersecurity with limited resources. How should we think about prioritizing what we can do? We don't always have. There's never enough time to get it all done, and particularly as smaller businesses, they're just trying to make do. What are some of the things we can do and consider? While we prioritize what efforts, where we should put our effort. There are lots of different things we could focus on. How should we think about that?
So there's lots of different tools that can help help you gain visibility of what your priority threats and flaws are and gaps are in your organization. So it's really using tools like Glasstrail to kind of get visibility of those gaps and those vulnerabilities and those risks. And going, okay, I've got 5 high risk, 4 medium. I'm going to start with the high risk and I'm going to fix those. I'm going to solve those vulnerabilities. You get patched, all of those kind of things. But those tools can help you decide which ones put you at greatest risk, and then you can deal with those first. And then obviously like using Onwardly to track, your processes and understand where you are in your maturity and use that to help you see what's next and how you move forward.
Yeah, a lot of it is about just getting visibility of everything you've got first up, right? So to prioritize, you need to understand
what you need to, what you actually need to put in order. I think it's people, it's taking a holistic view of your security program and your privacy program. It's not just, locking down one thing like my hosting environment or not just training my staff. It's thinking about the whole spectrum of activity that needs to take place because, a security program in general consists of lots of different areas. Sometimes people are even unaware of those areas completely. So getting familiar with the broad aspects, the broad areas of cybersecurity and doing something at least in each one of them, as opposed to, we're really great with our hosting environment, our production environment's amazing, but then, we're doing nothing with our people. So
and things do change over time as well. You have to go. We can't stand still on that. If you evaluated something at a point in time, chances are it changes. What was good a few weeks ago may not be good. So no, it's constant. It doesn't stay. It's never ending, never finished. And I think that's probably another point is that a lot of folks think about their security program as a point in time thing. We did something work 2 years ago
and we're good.
Yeah.
We've done that exercise.
There's a lot of frameworks out there that can help customers kind of with a maturity path. So something like the Essential 8 that's through the Australian government, that's a very popular framework. And it's really popular because it's practical and it, it takes you through 4 different stages of maturity and helps you, not everything's going to be great at the beginning, but it lets you know your gaps and then helps you move through that. So,
and you complete, the idea is there is a complete level 1, isn't it? You don't just sort of, it's not just like a little bit of this. It's like the idea is you want to get that really good foundational layer and then move on to the next one. You can really overinvest in some areas almost too much, despite with leaving some areas really open. And so I love how the E8 framework in particular captures that sort of just make sure that these kind of core foundational things are in place first, and then kind of move up to the next stage.
It's overwhelming for smaller businesses, and security and IT aren't their core functions, right? So it's giving them something basic to kind of start with, rather than they're not going to be super technical.
Rather than just going something straight to ISO 27001 or something like that, which is pretty intense.
Absolutely.
Indeed.
Another key trend that I'm seeing in the cyber world is around building resiliency. So kind of the idea that you're not going to get breached is kind of gone. The idea now is that you need to assume that you have or will be breached and build resiliency and processes around what you're going to do in the case of a breach. So really starting to think about
assuming
that.
it's going to happen.
As
opposed to security by obscurity, which is we're far away, no one knows about us, no one cares about us. That's less true than it ever has been.
Absolutely. And it's really starting to impact New Zealanders, right? There's been a couple of breaches recently that have fully impacted New Zealanders and New Zealand businesses. So,
And we're quite it's probably a bit of a generalization, but we're fairly trusting folks, and we're not trained to be highly skeptical necessarily of people asking us for information, or taking phone calls, or even what we see on the internet. And that's sort of a good trade but it gets us into trouble. And so developing a mindset of I can't just trust everything that comes across my path. I need to scrutinize that, and helping out other folks in our world who are perhaps even outside this industry to think that way as well.
Absolutely.
And not just give credit card details, or not just accept that nice call from that nice person that was really lovely on the phone, and then I sent them $10,000. So it's being developing a mindset, I think, of just much more test that assumption, scrutinize what's really going on here. And in the age of AI and all this, we've talked about all of this, but it's harder to trust.
It's very hard to trust, and I think that's why it's so important to go. Even with our best education, we won't be 100%. So we have to have a plan, and there has to be a tested plan for what happens when this does go wrong, because the level of sophistication is going to be so high. So you have to do those simulations. You have to run those tests and trials. I was at the Institute of Directors conference last week, and the survey they did at the conference was about 30% of people had done a simulation in the last year. And which is, you could say that's quite good in a way, probably a lot better than it used to be, but people are not practicing. Still a lot goes down when this happens.
And you learn so much when you run through a simulation, and it might not just be the technology side, but how you're going to, say, communicate with your customers. What kind of back-end infrastructure do you need to support a breach? How will your customers be impacted? How will they be affected? And what do you need to put in place to kind of support resolving the issues that they're facing? So it's not just now a back office kind of IT problem. It also impacts your customers directly.
Yes, it's a whole company problem, isn't it?
It is,
And how you respond makes a huge difference to the size of the impact. It could be the difference between a business-ending event and not. Just in the response. The attack is one aspect of that, but the response. And almost more important in some ways.
It is.
You could argue. So how do you talk to your customers about that? When you're trying to balance prevention versus response? They're two different sort of sides of the same coin, I guess. How do you balance those? How do you balance those two aspects?
Prevention's a lot about visibility, right?
Prevention is a lot about visibility. So it's first understanding what everything looks like. Knowing your own house, knowing everything about it is a good first step, so that then you can say, what are the meaningful prevention steps we can take now that we really understand what we've got? But yeah, it does need to balance with the other side of it as well.
Yeah. And then for us, especially, for our customers as well, it's building that culture of security so that every part of the business is thinking about security. All of your employees, they've got a mindset about security. And so you're really developing every action, everything you build, everything that you support, and you're doing it with security in mind. And so you're kind of, making it everyone's responsibility.
Yes.
And therefore everyone's involved in the outcomes as well.
Yeah, training people to spot things, one technique of one of many is providing a way for people to register something that looks suspicious, inside the company.
Yeah.
So
phishing tests are always fun.
Phishing tests, but even even a Slack channel, say we used to have one in a previous company called suspicious activity, and it wouldn't be like a full-on breach. It'd just be like, hey, who's that person walking down the hall that no one recognizes, in the building, or something seems to be going weird with the marketing website. Is that a new thing? And more often than not, it was like, oh, this is expected, but it was training people to register and identify things that looked suspicious.
Absolutely.
And sometimes they might turn into an incident, but most of the times they wouldn't. But it's developing that that culture of ownership around. I see something, I talk about it and I report it. I was in a little example. It was about 5 p.m. in a previous company. We were standing around and we saw someone come into the floor. This is a properly swiped in floor. You can't really get in without a swipe tag. And they came in and they sort of just walked into someone's office and didn't know who they were, never seen them before. And there was a few of us kind of looked around, looked at each other and like, who's that? And they were there for about 2 minutes. And then they walked out and they walked towards the elevator. And so I just sort of walked, I came around the other way and met them in the elevator and just to introduce myself, said, hi, how's it going? With a kind of view of like, who are you? And it turns out they were the cleaner. So they didn't look like a cleaner, but they were the cleaner and they had a badge and everything. They sat down and checked out and it's like, okay, that makes sense. They knew the person. It was a little bit weird. They probably should have followed a different protocol. So it didn't end up being an incident, but it was the type of activity that was definitely looked really suspect.
And you want people
and you want people like,
yeah.
And it wasn't sort of this whole big confrontation thing. It was just like, just introduce, hi, how are you? I'm Phil. Are you new here? What's, and then we quickly figured out who they were. But that type of thing, if people maybe hadn't been trained or we hadn't been trained, we might have just assumed it was all above board and then it might not have been. So how can we teach, how can tech leaders and security professionals collaborate effectively to identify trends and prioritize their efforts? This is you're doing a lot of work with a lot of companies. How are you seeing, how do you find, how does it work when you're working with customers, your clients? How do you get that collaborative effort humming, so it's not just all on you, it's not just all on them? How do you foster that sense of collaboration in your world?
Yeah, I think it's definitely a two-way thing, and just lifting the awareness of security improves that. I think you could say previously, tech leaders, they just want to get a job done, and security is a barrier to operations, and that kind of attitude. I think you can't have that attitude anymore, and the tech leaders can spot stuff that's coming up on the horizon. And they can see what's coming down the path, and they might be able to inform their colleagues about what's going on and what to look out for, what's changing the environment that they see. And it's the same the other way around, right? There's a lot of people who are deeply into what's going on in cyber and understand how that's evolving, and can teach us, developer land, a lot about what to look out for, right? So it's definitely got to be a collaboration, and I think it's also between organizations as well.
Yes.
Sharing one of the things that I do with the team is when there's been a breach, we look at the lessons learned. So there'll typically be eventually a report around what happened, and a really great example is the LastPass breach that happened last year. They put out a really comprehensive report of how it happened, and it actually started through a home network for one of their engineers with elevated privileges. So we sat down and thought, we've got people working from home. What can we do to educate them around home network security. So, shared some information, and so we're learning from all of those breaches and how we can use those learnings to make a difference.
Only for some of those postmortems.
Yeah,
and some of those
absolutely.
companies, I mean, it does eventually sort of come out, doesn't it? How it all happened, and it's taking stock of that and going, oh, okay, how does that affect us? I think, one of the trends that I've seen and what we try to do, with our customers and our business in general is sell the benefits of being a security and privacy minded company, as well as it's not just preventing all the scary things. That's definitely one really important aspect of it, but actually there are some amazing benefits to being a more secure company, right? So you're obviously protecting what you have, but you're able to build and engender trust with your own customers more effectively. And that can be the difference between winning a deal and not.
Oh, it's a huge thing. I mean, looking at everybody looking at their supply chain and saying, what are my risks as part of, so often there's a third party dimension to a cyber attack.
Yeah, absolutely.
So as we've seen locally in New Zealand as well, that's happened. So a lot of the people I talk to are looking at how can they, make themselves more attractive and get more opportunities and
building trust
by having better profile.
A lot of it's just table stakes now. Like people, a prospective customer might have engaged with you, and it's like they're expecting just to see some really baseline stuff, and if you can't demonstrate that confidently, they may just walk away and be like, I don't know. And it's often the first signs. If you present a really confident story and can show them, really clearly what you're doing and how the measures that you're taking, they may not need to dig in, to the nth degree. They build enough confidence straight up. But if you can't show the confidence to begin with, they're probably gonna keep digging until they get to the bottom of what's really going on, and so it can slow the process down a lot. And maybe even compromise the deal that you're working on. So speaking in the language of revenue and helping build and actually win new business is a language that certainly any leader in a growing startup wants to talk about. So that's a really positive angle. Another angle that I see perhaps less talked about is actually acquisitions. So I was speaking to a person not that long ago who's right in the center of the mergers and acquisitions department at a really big tech company, but US-based tech company. And their job is basically to either write down the deal sizes hugely because the security and risk situation is just awful, or just kill the deal completely. And so these founders that have spent 5 to 10 years maybe working really hard, they've got their opportunity at a huge exit. And it literally just falls on it. It just gets
because all the energy's in that one area, and someone looks at it with a totally different lens.
Well, they come in, they're like, we can't take on this level of risk. We don't know what we don't know here. This is too much chaos, too much risk for us to go any further. And it's something I hadn't quite considered as deeply, but it made a lot of sense. Is that if you're looking to get acquired, which most startups are, at some point, which is very, very much a kind of valid path. How when you actually get to that point, do you have a culture of security? Have you got a history of this thing being done really well? And it's way easier to do at the beginning and build that up than it is to sort of retrofit frantically at the last minute. And they will know, by the way, that you're crash renovating your security program.
We see a lot more security scrutiny now with cybersecurity insurance, right? Insurance companies are really wanting to make sure that their customers have all these processes in place before they agree to paying out that insurance or even signing up for the insurance policy.
You're getting it in the first place. It's becoming much harder, right?
That's another whole thing. And that's actually often a driver as well, just to investing further into it. Like we got raked over the coals by our insurance process, and now we need to figure some things out.
We can help with that.
See that a bit, If you're feeling hard done by your insurance company, come and we'll help you. But it's very real and for the obvious reasons, right? We're seeing a lot of breaches, a lot of risks, and that industry won't survive unless people really up their game. So talking about the positive benefits, and it's sometimes refreshing as well, because we know that there's lots of risk and we have to talk about the bad stuff, but it's really nice to be able to hit home some of those kind of positive talking points.
It is an opportunity, and it's still a big opportunity because not everyone is good at it. So if you can be good at it, it can make you stand out, because it's just as you know, we sell quite a few products, and if I'm on a call to an American customer and I can say we're ISO compliant, it makes the conversation go a lot smoother.
Yes.
Then if otherwise they've just got they just got a tick box and if you got it, then cool, we can keep talking. If you haven't,
no, go the long way around.
We'll just go and talk to somebody else that's got it,
right? Indeed. Well, look, we are coming up for time, I think, on this episode of Upwards. So thank you for being such excellent guests. It's really nice to have you here in person. If you want to know a little bit more from either Liz or Andrew or myself, please leave a comment wherever you're listening to this. Reach out to us. We'd love to have a chat with you. We'd love to hear from you. Any questions for us in particular, we will do our best to answer those as well. You can find us online. You can find us on LinkedIn, YouTube, and wherever you get your podcasts. This is called Upwards, and we'll look forward to talking to you next time. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.